flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to
Please
take,
remain
standing, please. We'd like a moment of silence for Hannibal Costa, who passed away today, and she was town clerk for a long time.
And clerk of the Board of
Board of
Canvassers as
Canvassers.
well.
So, okay. First, we're going to start with old business. Tiverton High School voter registration drive.
We heard from the school, Clerk Ginny V contacted them. They had the date of May 21st or May 23rd. The lunch hour is 10:40 to 11:30 maybe?
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock, so it would be in that range. We go, you know, and sit outside the, so I know that
And what days?
Deetta would not be able to make
What-
that.
What days were they?
It is the May 21st or May 23rd. Those, after that, it would be too late.
Okay.
So does the board have a preference?
No,
It's during the day, so Paul works and Andrea works. Bobby, if we can get somebody to go with you, one of the Board of Canvas members here, could you handle that drive? Okay. So Bob, and we'll send a clerk from my office, or I'll try to go, but somebody will.
Are we going to alert the school ahead of time to have them promote it so that the students will know why they're
We
there?
did contact them, we're gonna get back with the date, and we'll tell them to please try to promote it. Maybe we can do up some kind of flyer and send it to them.
and usually to coordinate with that, the government worker, the government instructor, he was wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he'll be doing it again this year.
okay.
So, Lori will take care of arranging this stuff.
Did we decide on the 21st or the 23rd?
It's up to Bob.
Oh, okay.
If someone you feel, we're there.
All right. Okay.
Probably the 23rd.
So you're going to need the letter from the Senate?
Yes. So you can announce it. Why don't you announce it now?
We have a letter from the Honorable Senator 70, acknowledge the BOC has sent a regular support of BOE legislation.
So this involves legislation that the Board of Election had submitted to the legislators this year. Deetta, Bobby, myself, Lori, and I can't remember if anybody else went with us. But we went up there, sat through their explanations on it. It seemed to really work for the Board of Canvass. We sent our reps and senators a request that they support that legislation, and Senator James Seveny responded back to us. It just says, I'm writing to acknowledge a receipt of letter in support of the various Senate bills requested by the Rhode Island Board of Elections relating to improvements in our voting process. As a fundamental obligation and exercise of democracy, I strongly endorse any action to improve our citizens' ability and opportunity to cast their ballot. I concur with you and the Board of Elections that our emergency balloting process needs improvement, and I will push for passage of Senate Bill 482. I am also specifically interested in seeing Senate 478 pass into law. I firmly believe that candidates for public office must be held strictly to our standards of law and behavior. Senate 478 prohibits any person from placing their name on a ballot if they are delinquent in campaign finance report filing requirements or have outstanding fines due to the Board of Election. I will support all of the voting process bills you have endorsed, and I would like to thank you all for the service to the Tiverton community, our state, and our democracy. Keep up the great work. Please feel free to contact me anytime.
And here is a summary of some of the things that we submitted. I won't tell you the particulars, but one had to do with the emergency voting, absentee voting, one was write-in ballots, identification at the polls, certification of mail ballots, uniform polling place times. That was always a problem with some of the other places, so they want every place to be open at 7 o'clock. Eliminate the signing of the mark now that we have the poll pads. You don't have to worry about that. Affiliation, party affiliation, we've changed to 30 days from 90 days, which we think is a good idea. And also, one of the best things for us is to be able to combine polling places. So those are just a few of the things that we have in that letter that we want to have be submitted and supported by our legislators. So if anybody wants to see the detail of that, I'm going to leave it here.
Actually, the one that would really serve us well is the combined polling
Yes,
places.
Right, exactly.
Good morning.
Good evening. My apologies for being a few minutes late.
See, we waited for you. You have to say the Pledge of Allegiance by yourself.
Okay.
Don't go down to certification of mail ballots, new business.
So we have 25 mail ballot applications for the STR. There's 4 cert sheets, so you're going to sign, and Andy, you will sign the cert sheets as well. Okay.
How many did you say, Nancy?
25. These are sent out to all our permanent shut-ins and others that request them. It's part of the charter requirement that we allow for mail ballots, applications to be sent.
We'll just keep it going this way then so we don't get confused here.
Andrea signed.
Sure, sure.
We've heard that before, haven't we? Can you believe he's still around? Charlie? Yeah.
And I put the discussion of the financial town referendum at the end, so that
Good.
hold up other people that don't care about hearing about our poll workers.
Okay.
So that-
It should be right there with his stuff.
oh,
Yeah.
Still that?
It's your stack.
This is what I next. So you're gonna, the next petition signatures. Is following your agenda. Yeah. But at that point, Gio may want to speak on it. And if he does speak to it, you're gonna have to and then whether you want public speaking or not. Limit to the amount of time.
Okay.
This is,
This is just to certify the names, right?
Okay, so I'm gonna, the attorney just gave me this, so I'm giving it to you. But let him call the next item, and then I'll explain what I have.
Nancy, do you want me to pass them around, or are you gonna just pass them down?
He's passing it down, that's all right. As long as you got one on the way, so we'll get. So call the next item, and I'll tell you what I have.
Next on the list is certificate of electric petition signatures.
Okay, so, you know, I was away last week.
Yeah.
We received a petitions, we received two petitions for alternate budgets beside the Budget Committee one. One was from a Mr. Souza, who texted me on, Lori was here on the Saturday, April 20th to noon. We put that on the petitions, and we do the routine every year, the same thing we do. Well, Mr. Souza texted me the morning on the Saturday and said he would not be submitting this petition. So that petition, I just hold in our files, but the 50 signatures required were not submitted. He texted that he would not be submitting the petition. And then we have a second petition, which was submitted by Mr. Sanford Mantel. He did submit the required signatures for this. They confirmed 6370. They confirmed there are 70 qualified signatures here. So that's what this one is for. We don't confirm signatures on the Budget Committee one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's presented forward. But on any alternate petitions or alternate resolutions, we have to confirm the 50 signatures. So that is to certify, the Board of Canvas on the back certifies signatures.
Okay,
That's all I have to say.
but we have to sign it, right?
Well, and if I may, just to
Yes.
add a note here. I just circulated around a memorandum that I prepared. Nancy had, before she left for vacation, asked me to look at the various items, including the referenda and the petitions, to make sure that they were, so I could be prepared to advise you tonight. And so I did so, and as the memorandum outlines, I did find what I consider a number of fatal defects in the Mantel petition. And I think there are some serious issues with its potential approval or certification. Now, just to talk about process a little bit, the line item you have here is certification of the signatures.
Right.
And so it might seem that what you're doing is just saying, well, does this signature match the
Right.
voting rolls? But really, that's not quite the case. What you're obliged to do under the charter is to not just certify that the signature matches, but to certify that the signature is as intended under the charter provisions that allow for electoral petitions. And what I mean by that is that there is a court case from 2 years ago that actually details this to some good extent. The judge in that case, and I've got the quote in the memo, essentially found that if you present a petition to an elector that doesn't allow them to make an informed decision as to what they're signing, then that signature is not valid. That is a defective petition in that the electors have signed something that they may have thought meant something else. And in this case, because there are mathematical errors and other defects on the face page of the petition as well as the supporting documentation, I don't believe you can determine the intent of the petition, and therefore you can't determine the intent of the 70 people that added their signatures to these sheets. And I'm happy to go into as much or as little detail as you care. It is such an important issue that I thought a memorandum made sense. I wouldn't mind just taking the opportunity to briefly go through it, and I would.
I'd like to hold this issue until tomorrow, because we haven't had a chance to read this. This is the first time we've seen it, so I think we ought to hold this until we've had a chance to digest this lengthy report. So we should hold, how late can we wait to certify the petition?
Till the 28th.
To the 28th. I just think we should table it until we've had a chance to read this.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. My name is Fausto Anguilla.
Yeah, I was just going to call you.
Yes, and I'm here with Mr. Mantel. And I would appreciate reviewing, I have many comments to make with what your solicitor just said, in response to what your solicitor just said, as a former solicitor myself for many years. But I would like to see a copy of Mr. Ciccione's memo.
Yeah, I think we can give it, can't we give it to?
I brought a couple spare copies just in case.
I want to say that there are some conflicting dates, just so that the board is clear on this. We do have to the 28th to certify, but the Board of Elections is telling us, there is a deadline to get these ballots printed. But we're not going to send it up there till it's certified and hope for the best on the ballots getting.
Well, I'm not suggesting waiting until the 28th. I think, tomorrow or the next day, but I don't feel comfortable voting on anything until I've read this and digested it. And
Can I ask one question? I've reviewed the charter as well, and I just want to know if it says in the charter, and I understand what you're saying, that there are some, quote, defects. There is nothing in the charter, if I am correct, that says that the arithmetic of the budget has to pan out. My understanding, according to our charter, is as long as the requirements of Section 301B1, A through E are met, meaning that the dollar amount is shown, appropriate to the school department, appropriate to municipal budget, so on and so forth. And as long as Section 301 D1 and D3, which can be found on page 5 of the charter, that as long as the specific docket items show an increase or decrease, or a petitioner budget is remanded back to the budget committee to figure out how to increase or decrease. And as long as in section 301 D3, that there are 50 qualified signatures, that's it. Those are the only requirements. So basically, mathematical, it's just easier for me to say, mathematical errors do not come into play. Am I correct in that?
No, I don't think so. I think the 3 points you make are correct, that there are the 3 standards. In fact, if you look at page 2 of my memo, I think I repeat that almost
And you do.
precisely.
I can see that.
And so that is correct. The problem is multifold. The initial deficiency that I talk about is not the budget items, and I think there is a conflict between what's in the supporting documentation of the proposed budget versus the petition, right? And that is, I think, a serious issue. But even before we get to that, the biggest problem I have, or at least the first one I raise here, is that the percentage, what's shown as a percentage decrease in the budgeter's petition, that math doesn't work. And so there is a mathematical error there, which could result in, depending on one of the, I ran it 4 different ways. I attached my math to this memo as an exhibit. Depending on what you assume about the errors and how you would correct them, you end up with anywhere from a 0.1%, I believe it was, tax increase to a 0.5% decrease. But in none of the calculations do you end up with a 0.02% decrease, which is what the petition states. So if that's inaccurate, I think that's the part that worries me the most when you have an elector signing a petition saying, well, I'm signing this and I'm going to get a tax decrease of 0.02%.
And my understanding too is when people go to sign this petition, that they could have a chance to look at that budget and see for themselves and then decide if they wanted to sign that petition, and they so did. So therefore, by our legal standards of our charter, again, as long as all those line items are met, which I think we're in agreement.
No, we're not.
Okay.
I don't want to say
So I will
that.
take that back. As long as all those are met, then it should be up to the voters to then go look at the budgets and compare them and make their best decision. And as it's been put in the past, it should be up to the voters. As long as these signatures are done correctly, as long as these requirements are met, it should be up to the voters to choose.
Yeah,
And that's been an argument long held in this town by many different sides.
Oh, I agree, and I don't, again, I'm not disputing that those are the standards. What I'm suggesting is that there are so many errors in both the math, the form, the presentation of the petition, that the standards have not been met. The standards, say that you have to have the amount spent for the school, the amount spent on the municipal side. You have to have the percentage shift in tax. And if those are not correct, then they haven't met that standard.
But it doesn't say that in here, and we don't have any mechanism in place, and maybe this is something we should look at down the road, to have any budgets put forward either through the town or through petitioner to be verified by a CPA before they get to this point of getting signatures. As it stands, we don't have that. So therefore, again, legally, looking at our charter, we don't need to get into the mathematics of it.
Well, I would disagree with that. I think last year, in a separate case, there was a very clear judgment by the judge in that case that you serve in a judicial capacity. Your job is to actually look at that data and do that analysis. Now, if you choose to hire a CPA to do that, that's fine. But whatever the method, it is your responsibility to actually make that assessment. You have that role, and the courts have affirmed that. So I think that in fact you have that obligation. More importantly, perhaps, there is a balance of interest here that you have to assess, right? And believe me, I was more than hesitant when I noted the initial errors to do anything that would recommend not enfranchising the voters and this particular petitioner. And I looked for every way I could to conceive of coming here and recommending that this be allowed. But as we went deeper and deeper, as I went through those line items and realized how many variations there were, I just can't in good conscience recommend that this confusing document and misleading petition be put in front of your voters. I also think that there was the other thing that bothered me about that, right? Because we don't want to disenfranchise voters. The other thing that bothered me about that was the idea that these are very difficult petitions, right? These are 20-something pages. It's a lot of line items. It's a lot of room for potential error. And if I came here and I said, well, there was a missed decimal point, or there was a typo somewhere, I would advise you to use your discretion to allow that to proceed. But this goes far beyond that. I pointed out some of those, but not as determinative of the question. Those I understand, that can happen, and the idea that we have the chance for the voters to look at this, I think, would outweigh something minor like that. What we have here is something much bigger, and we have some clear guidance, again, from court cases just from a year or two ago that tell us that you have to, that the balance lands on the side of process. I think in the case, the case that I'm recalling, I'll just get right to it, I guess. This is in Larkin v. Tiverton.
Right.
As it relates to the balancing of the equities and the public interest, plaintiff argues, as you are right now, that the electors of the town deserve a choice. But the court observes that the purpose of 301 is to provide an orderly process whereby various budget proposals can be submitted so electors can vote on whichever one they choose. However, electors also deserve the right to have the mandate of the charter complied with. Otherwise, the rule of law would be meaningless and subject to the whim of town officials. In other words, and I emphasize this in the memo, the court finds that the public interest leans in favor of maintaining the integrity of the process rather than ignoring the mandates of the charter solely to provide choice to the electors. And I think that could not be clearer.
So let me ask this, though. In regards to the Larkin v. Town of Tiverton matter, what was the particular event that they're saying put this into motion? Was it just?
I can speak, I litigated that case on behalf of the school committee, and I can certainly speak to what it was. The question was whether it was submitted timely and whether the docket was included.
Could you just,
gonna have to
your
state-
name?
Yep.
I'm sorry, could you just state your name for us?
State your name.
Vicky
and-
Bama,
Okay.
counsel to the Tiverton School Committee.
Thank you.
And so if I may just complete the thought here, or answer your question, I guess. Yes, the matter was a timely submission of the petition.
So it wasn't the mathematics of it.
That's right.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just briefly, my name.
And your name?
Sure.
Would you take the microphone, please?
Glad to. Thank you. My name is Fausto Anguilla. I am counsel for Mr. Mantell. I want to thank you all for having me here this afternoon. I've heard what my good friend, Mr. Ciccione, said, and I can tell you line by line, I think it's just not accurate. I don't think it's a fair renditioning of the law. I am familiar with Larkin in preparation for this hearing. I must say, when you were discussing the points that you were making, I almost felt like getting in my car and going home because you were making exactly the right points.
Thank you.
Exactly the right points. I look forward to reading Mr. Ciccione's memo. If the chair wants us back tomorrow, I'd be delighted to come back tomorrow. However, the issue before this Board of Canvassers is really pretty straightforward, and that's to certify Mr. Mantell's budget. And we're not talking against any other budget committee, or anybody else. All we're asking for is certify Mr. Mantell's budget. If there's any merit, and I don't think there is, if there's any merit to this math argument, you know what? You have a financial town meeting coming up. Make it there where it belongs. And you know what? You have newspapers, write letters. And you know what? Stand in the street corners and yell and scream. It's a bad budget. But it's not this board's function to determine if it's a good budget or bad budget. It's simply, this board's function is very simple. It's very simple. It's to certify the signatures, and if the standards outlined by you are met, put it on the ballot and let the voters decide. Thank you.
Just a point. Is there any provision that these mathematical errors can be clarified? Or that the budget itself, the signatures be certified, and that the numbers be trued up at another time?
No, and actually I addressed that in the memo because I think that's a great and sort of, the first question I would ask if I was in your chair. But unfortunately, the charter has a very specific provision saying that they cannot be altered, and if there's any alterations, those alterations are void. So your charter explicitly and very clearly says you're not allowed to alter a petitioner's proposal.
Okay, do you have some, go ahead.
But finish your
Do you
thought.
have some specifics of where those are marked there? That
Yeah.
it would make a significant difference in the voting?
Absolutely. So on page 3 of the memo, I offer some detail on each. Obviously, the one that I first referenced, the tax levy inaccuracy. I not only give a sort of longer description there, but also if you flip to the very last page, you'll see the spreadsheet that I created in order to attempt to sort this out. And on that last page, there's a highlighted yellow line that shows, but I modeled this after the last 2 pages of the Budget Committee proposal, which are where they run the math to provide the numbers for the petition. And I added a lot of detail. It's probably not relevant here, but I didn't want to exclude anything. I wanted to make sure that I was as thorough as possible. So I've included every line item in there, and you'll see the town proposal in the first column, and then 4 variations of what I call the Sanford Mantell proposal. The first is what I reference as the apples-to-apples comparison. So if we treat his proposal, interpret the mistakes as best we could to line up with the town proposal, using the town's form as the model, that's the first column. And then I made 3 adjustments, changing some of the more significant errors and making assumptions one way or the other so that you could see what the effect of those errors is, or correcting the errors, I guess. And so the first is...
Are we going to go through this tonight?
That's what I'm saying. Now, let's go back to our original thing. I think we can't do this tonight.
Let's hold up. Let her speak.
I go back to my original thought. There's just too much here that we need to think about and look at ourselves, and for us to make a decision tonight on the fly, I don't feel comfortable.
No, and I understand that, and I'm of course, I'm at your service, and I'll do it however you please. If it's helpful for me to go through some of the issues so that when you read it, you have the context, I'm happy to do that. If it's preferred to come back tomorrow and after you've looked at it in some detail, and then I can do the same, I'm happy to do that.
Oh, do you have anything? Mr. Solicitor, these errors that you referred to, are these actual mathematical errors, or is it just a question of logistically placing numbers in certain slots rather than others?
Well, so if you look at the front of the petition, you know, the one that first caught my eye was I just said, well, I'm just going to do the math and add up the school department budget, the municipal budget, and see if they add up to the levy that's stated there, and they're off by $30,000. So I believe, because there's a $30,000 line item for abatements, that is simply an attempt to reflect that money will not be collected, and so it's understandable that would arise, but I think it's a mistake. And it certainly doesn't follow the form that the Budget Committee proposal does. So now you're not comparing apples to apples if you take Mr. Mantel's position on his face. So that's not a huge number, but it is a clear error. And again, on the exhibit, I include the third column under SM proposal includes us fixing that error. It shows you that it only changes a penny on the assessment, right? It goes from $15.82 to $15.83. It's not particularly significant, but it's certainly an error. Now, what concerns me more, as I was saying, is that what that means, at least if that's the only error you correct, what that means for the levy increase is that it's actually a net wash. The taxes don't go up or down. I only went out to one decimal place. If you continue it out, it's actually 0.002% that adjusts the budget. Now, he says on here that's 0.2%, or 0.02%. So I think that might be a typographical error. It might be different math. I don't know, but I can tell you that because of the $30,000 error, you also end up with, at the very least, a levy proposal that looks like it's 9 times bigger than it really is, right? 0.002 is not the same as 0.02, and it's a significant change when you look at the effect on the taxpayers. Now, that's not the biggest swing, right? If there was also a $200,000 line item that was omitted for a capital account transfer. It was simply omitted from the final column on his supporting documentation. If you change that, you end up with a 0.5% tax increase, tax decrease. But again, if you look at the apples to apples comparison, if you use his numbers as best you can figure, because it's not clear, if you use his numbers against the Budget Committee's form, it's actually a tax hike of almost 0.1%.
So with all due respect, Solicitor, a couple of questions I have. One, do you have a mathematical background to be doing this? And two, who asked you to do this?
The town clerk asked me to review all of these, and.
But did she ask you to review it mathematically, or did she ask that you review it legally?
She asked me to review it, and I took it upon myself to try to review it as best I could. I don't have a degree in mathematics, if that's what you're asking.
Well, perhaps.
Just to clarify this, I was away last week, but if I were here, I'd have sent everything to the solicitor. Same is done with Mr. DeSisto, same is done with Mr. Tights.
So they all reviewed the
After
mathematics of the budgets?
No, I'm not telling you anything about mathematics.
Okay.
After one of the council meetings, I asked Mr. Cicione if there was a date convenient to them, as we has always done with the Board of Canvass, to have him attend, because we're going to be certifying, and when he certifies and attends, of course, we would have sent him.
Right.
At the time, it was a Monday before I left, we didn't even have any alternate budgets.
And I don't mean to question you
But
sending
whatever
anything.
we had, we would have sent him. If I were here, I'd have sent it to.
And I'm not questioning you sending everything to him at all. I'm just asking if someone specifically asked you to look at the mathematics of this. That is my question, as opposed to sending it for you to just review.
And I think I said no. I did.
Okay.
I don't, I'm at a loss, I don't know how we should proceed. I can tell you with regard to the $30,000 issue that Mr. Cicione raised, I'll show you Mr. Mantel's budget, show you exactly where that $30,000 pops up. With regard to the $200,000, what that means is you're borrowing, you're taking less out of the general revenues than the Budget Committee budget. It's also in Mr. Mantel's budget. My mother sent me to law school and not med school because I can't add and subtract. Quite honestly. However, I have gone through this budget. I have gone through budgets numerous times in my career. I would say two things. Number one, it's not the function of the Board of Canvassers to go through a budget line by line. That's simply ultra vires, beyond what your charter allows you to do. Having said that, if you want to talk about the math in here, I would be delighted for Mr. Mantell to address exactly how he came up with all these numbers. And I have a world of respect for your solicitor. I've known him for a long time. He's a good man. But quite frankly, going through a math function and Board of Canvassers is simply not done in the state. It's not done under law. It's not done under your charter. I don't know if you've ever done that before. In this body, I would venture to guess you never have. And I would also submit, quite honestly, it's not your function. Your function is to certify this budget onto the ballot if it meets the prerequisites that were laid out earlier. I'd be delighted to read whatever my friend Giovanni would like me to read. Are you free tomorrow?
Sure.
And Mr. Mantell and I have gone through this
So when I
thing.
come down for breakfast.
And we be, quite frankly, number one, it doesn't matter if there's a math error or not. That's for the voters to decide. And number two, even if there isn't one in the first place.
And I would also add on to Mr. Romangula saying,
Excuse me,
there's
I
actually,
can have you two one at a time, okay?
okay.
I finished.
Oh,
Through?
he says he's finished.
I'd be happy to have it.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd be interested in Mr. Chaconi's memo as well, and I would also want to know if he himself found mathematical errors in the Budget Committee's submission. If you look at those numbers, they don't true up either, in that the revenues do not match the expenditures, and by a happy, interesting little coincidence, the number by which it is off is $30,000.
So I will ask that question, then. Did you mathematically review the budget committee's
Uh,
budget?
It's not the purview of the canvassing board to review the budget committee budget. There are two.
Hold on. My question was, not for us to review it, but did you, since you went through this budget mathematically, did you also do the same for the budget committee's budget?
I understand the question.
That is my question.
I understand the question. My point is that under your charter, and I cite the sections, you are not, your authority does not extend to reviewing the budget committee budget in the same way, because there are provisions as to elector petitions that have requirements that relate to the math, right? The school committee number.
But it doesn't relate to the math, it's not in our charter.
I'm sorry, it does. The school committee number, the municipal number, and the levy have to be calculated. And so I reviewed the budget committee budget to the extent that I wanted to make the calculation for the petitioner's budget in the exact same form that the budget committee, whose purview it is to determine the form of the petition they submit. Not yours, but the budget committee's. So I wanted to make sure I followed the authority who creates the form, so that I could determine whether the elector followed the model that they presented for this year's budget. And he didn't in a number of ways, which I state in the memo. So I did review it in order to make sure that all the formulas worked, all the numbers lined up, and we could do a true apples-to-apples comparison. And so, yes, I've spent honestly more hours than I care to admit looking at both budgets side by side for the last 3 days, attempting to make heads or tails of this.
Oh, and then did you also make sure that the appropriations were stated correctly and in conformance with the Budget Committee's vote?
No, as I said, that is not the purview of this committee, and I wasn't asked to do that for the budget committee.
Well, then you would have, if you had, you would have noticed that the levy amount is all wrong. The docket reads that the town shall appropriate a sum of $31,442,700 for school department general operating and capital expenses. That was not the vote of the budget committee.
If I may,
May I finish?
I don't believe it's relevant, and I don't want to, make this any longer than it needs to be, I'm sure, for this committee. I don't believe that's relevant. It's not the purview of this committee to assess the budget committee's work.
Mr. Ciccone, I did not interrupt you. Please do not interrupt me. If you look carefully at the Budget Committee's vote of March 28th, and the minutes, they voted $3,442,700 for the operating, but they also voted for an additional capital amount of $316,000. That is not reflected on this docket. This docket only reflects the $3,442,700 for general operating and capital expenses. They took the number that was the operating number only, and they plugged it into a ballot for general operating and capital expenses. So this docket is in fact similarly
So-
incorrect.
So basically, I'm going to go back to a premise I made earlier. If both budgets are flawed, then shouldn't it just be up to the voters to decide, and therefore both budgets should, by our charter, by everything going on, shouldn't the voters get to decide on which budget they want to pass, since obviously there are issues with both budgets?
Actually, I think just the opposite. I think that if you were to find, if you had the authority to find that the Budget Committee budget wasn't appropriate, or if some other authority, appropriate authority, found that it was invalid, so if they went to court for an injunction perhaps to stop that from moving forward, then neither would go on the budget. And by function, by state law, a function of state law, you would end up with the 2019 budget, or at least the expenditures, carried forward into 2020. So I believe that would be the result. Now, I have not done extensive research on that. That is my general understanding.
And I would also point out as a final matter, we seem to have failed to note that the resolve number 8 is illegal because it attempts to put the school committee capital amounts under the control of the town treasurer. That is illegal. There is statute to that effect, that it must be put under the control of the school committee. And there's case law going back to 1901 to that effect. So if Mr. Cicconi's idea is that, we should just go to court and decide this and we have another lawsuit, that doesn't seem like a very satisfactory solution to me.
If I may, I don't, in response to that, if I may, I find it difficult to comprehend that argument. If you have the ability and the authority to toss a resolution, then why wouldn't you have the authority to do the same to the petition? It's the same authority, same analysis, or in fact, I think it's actually a harder case to make that you have the authority to address a budget petition on its face. But I know that that's been litigated in the past. This very board has tossed petitions in recent years, and the court has upheld that. So I think to say that you can address those, but you somehow can't address the financial petition, I just can't follow that argument.
First of all, I'm only here trying to protect the Mantell budget, having that put on the ballot, okay? With regard to these other issues, my sister will be arguing the merits of the budget. I would point out, though, that the case law is clear that you can't put something that's illegal on the budget. That's different from putting on something that's mathematically incorrect, okay? Illegality is one thing, mathematical error is a totally different thing.
And that was the issue last year.
That's
Many of the-
right.
Many of the things were just
That's right,
illegal.
and that's a distinction you need to keep in mind, okay? With regard to your function under your charter, okay, you look at this thing, if there's nothing illegal on it, even assuming it's a horrible budget, assuming you hate the budget, that's not the question you ask yourself. The question is, were the signatures obtained properly? Are they certified? Is it in the form, the four criteria that you discussed earlier? Once you answer that affirmatively, your function is ended, respectfully. That's what the board of canvassers is in charge with doing.
And if I may...
Excuse me, Giovanni.
No,
Going
go ahead.
beyond in this mathematical game that Mr. Ciccione wants to play, where we all bring in slide rules and go and start looking at this number and that number and whatever, that's not what your charter permits you to do. If you went down that road, quite honestly, you would be acting illegally beyond your charge. So as interested as I am in how Giovanni played with his Excel spreadsheets and put this number here and that number there, that's all irrelevant, okay? For the voters to say, hey, we like this, we don't like it. And I look forward to your financial town meeting, because then we'll get our math lesson, not here.
If I-
At the hearing, actually.
At the hearing.
At the hearing.
You're representing him, and you represent the school board, right?
Correct.
We got to get together, okay? Okay?
Yes, I agree. And I think well, I would respectfully suggest there is a way to get together, and that's to follow your charter. Certify these signatures, certify this budget, put it on the ballot.
And what were the 4 criteria you had at the
So
beginning?
the 4 criteria under Section 301B, Section 301B1, excuse me, is A, the dollar amount to appropriate for that the budget proposals shall include A, the dollar amount to appropriate for the school department budget, B, the dollar amount to appropriate for the municipal budget, including the town clerk and town treasurer, C, the dollar amount to raise by taxation, including maximum dollar amounts for the motor vehicle, real and tangible property, and resulting total property tax levies, D, the percentage increase or decrease to the prior year's certified net tax levy, and E, if necessary, the dollar amount of the total property tax levy that is in excess of the maximum levy as calculated in accordance with Rhode Island General Law 44-5-2B.
Okay. Talking about 2 different issues here. One of you going to sit down, one got to stand, okay? Sorry.
Only one standing at one time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd be happy to sit.
If I may just address the illegality question, look, your charter is your law, right? As I spend a fair amount of the beginning of the memo spelling out, this is the authority that you're working under. And there is other, the U.S. Constitution obviously comes into play for any decisions like this. Process matters. But for the purposes of this, your charter is your law. And the 5 items that were just read out are the law that has to be followed by a petitioner. And if a petitioner fails to do that, it is in that sense illegal. And that's what we're trying to decide here, or what I think you're tasked with deciding. So I don't, I think that the word illegal is probably a little, heady when it comes to talking about a citizen trying to exercise their rights to participate in this process. And I wouldn't have chosen that word, honestly, if your prior solicitor, Mr. DeSisto, hadn't chosen that word when referencing his objections to the referenda that this board denied access to last year or the year before. So I actually, and I should probably have footnoted this with a thank you to Solicitor DeSisto, who's also a longtime friend of mine and Mr. Anguillas, because I used almost word for word the language from his memorandum from last year. Because why reinvent the wheel? He was right, the judge said he was right, and we're still right about that. Now, just because the result ends up being slightly different doesn't change the fact that the law is the law and illegal is still illegal.
I don't know how far you want me to take my argument tonight, but with regard to the memorandum from last year, the fact of the matter is that's exactly my argument. There you had 8 resolutions, okay? 3 were kept in at the town level, 5 went up to Superior Court. And there, the Superior Courts looked at these 5 resolutions. 2 had to do with tax rebates, which are not allowed under Rhode Island law. 2 had to do with policy beyond the budget. And the 3rd had to do with curtailing the power of the town council. That's what happened in Superior Court. And the judge so ruled. He said, hey, look, these 5 resolutions are all illegal. Illegal in the sense, not in the sense that anybody gets locked up, illegal in the sense that they're counter to law. Okay? What we're back here tonight, Mr. Mantell has put forth an alternative budget. An alternative budget is something that's clearly contemplated in your town charter. He put together that alternative budget following your forms, following your procedures, getting the signatures required, doing the math as best he could under that budget. That's what your town charter calls for. It's a great thing. It's called representative democracy. A citizen can put forth a budget and bring it to the voters, and the voters could pass on it. And that's all we're asking for, is let the voters pass on
That's
it.
fine. Mr. Souza, you have next?
John Souza, 178 Stony Hollow
Can you
Road.
lift the microphone so we can hear you?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
I guess she's got the hammer here tonight that I always have at home.
You can be a sir.
I'm not going to take sides about anything. We're here to get a budget to put forward to the voters. Nancy, what's the time frame that we have to have this done by, voted by, and in place?
You mean the certification?
Yes.
Well, the certification by the number of days backing it through the
Right.
charter would be the 28th, which is Saturday. But if I wait till the 28th, I cannot produce a ballot for the FTR hearing, which is required in the charter to have for the hearing.
So that's a week from,
No.
that's this weekend.
Sundays.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sunday.
And if I think you also have to take into account the Open Meetings Act and the requirement to repost this in advance.
Well, you could continue.
We can continue
You
this.
can continue, you don't have to adjourn, you can.
And that was my point to begin with.
My point is, we want an accurate budget. If it takes our town treasurer to go through both of these submissions and ensure that they're correct, and I would even be happy to volunteer to do it with her, having done a number of budgets myself, fine. I think we need to back off a little bit and get this right. I think it's grossly unfair. And I don't want to use the word stupid, but to submit a budget to the electorate that doesn't add up, that has mathematical errors, because we have a deadline to make. I used to work someplace where the CEO said if you can't get it done in 24 hours, work nights. Well, if we have to work nights, let's get it done. I think the voters deserve a budget that's accurate. And I will tell you, if I were going through a budget and I found that things didn't add up, the whole thing would be suspect. So I think we should figure out how we're going to get this done in time to meet Nancy's deadline. And as I said, I don't care if it makes staying up tonight and doing it. But I think something needs to be done. I think the town treasurer, as a very unbiased person and certainly knowledgeable, should do something. Beg your pardon?
You're buying the coffee.
Sir, sir.
You're not supposed to drink it. Thank you.
And if I may, just to add to that, I don't disagree with anything he said, of course. I think you should take every minute that you have and make sure that you're comfortable when you have this vote. Just for your background, we saw these petitions on Saturday. When the errors were noted, I brought that to the town council and raised that with the town council at their Monday meeting. Councilor Medeiros and others asked me to look at more detail of this. And so what I did was do a preliminary review Tuesday morning, sent a copy of a very, very rough draft, not only to Councilor Medeiros, but to Nancy to circulate to the full council, and with copies to both the administrator and the town treasurer, assuming that she would be the one best suited to tell me where I was wrong. I did that again today as soon as I finished the memo, and before I drove down here, that was also circulated to the treasurer and that same group again, in the hopes that, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. As I said, I don't have a degree in math. If I made an error, then please tell me. But I have tried to keep the appropriate parties in the loop from the minute we realized there was an issue.
Okay,
And by the way, I spoke to Mr. Mantel twice in that process.
Okay, we're going to open it up. Anybody's got 5 minutes. That's all we can say.
Okay, Sanford Mantel, I'm the petitioner of the alternate budget, and I do take issue with the inaccuracies that have been pointed out. I'd like to walk through that and show you what I did.
I also think that in other years, in many of the things that we do, there's an assumptive process, and we assume that the town budget is correct. We assume that the petitioner's budget, not just this year, but every other year. And it just seems kind of unconscionable to me that there isn't something in the law that says they have to be vetted by a professional. Because, as we said, we found problems in the budget committee's budget too. So with that in mind, I said, I think this is kind of a moot point.
Yes.
Mr. Mantel, you don't have a copy.
No.
Should.
I spoke to the solicitor, he told me what they were.
And I go back to my original thing, I think we shouldn't vote on this tonight.
I've got one extra.
And actually, it doesn't say just because we certified that it goes on the ballot.
So, Mr. Mantell, you did not receive that memo?
No. Okay, I just wanted to kind of give some background on why I put the budget together first, and then I'll go through the math and show you that it is accurate. I took a greater interest this year in the budget because we were expecting $3.1 million from the casino this year, so I thought that would have some impact on the budget. I followed the budget, not disputes, but followed the budget through the town council. I attended meetings, went to the budget committee, and I attended meetings. I watched it on YouTube. And as it made its way through, I came to the conclusion that it didn't really seem like a reasonably balanced budget, not in terms of balancing the budget, but in how the funds were allocated. So I went to the website, downloaded the file. I had to convert it to Excel because it's in PDF format. Even though the Excel file is a public document, it wasn't available. And I took the budget that was the Budget Committee's budget, copied it over, then I went through it line by line. I made some reductions, I made some reclassifications of expenses, I added expenses, and there was I actually had to reclassify capital because what was called capital was not capital. Then when I did the budget, I said, you know, it's got to be a couple of goals. I just can't just make a budget up. So I said I wanted the budget to be reasonable. I wanted it to be, I wanted to be sure that taxpayers did not incur a tax increase on their household real estate taxes, and I wanted to fully fund the request from the school committee. So what I did was I went through, I actually, as my attorney said, I went to the town clerk, got the paperwork, filled out the paperwork. I gave the clerk the numbers that I wanted input. She had me verify them. I signed off. I took the paper, and I also brought in the detailed line-by-line budget that I put together, as well as my budgeter's statement. Took it out, we got signatures, brought it back. It was logged in time, it was time-stamped, verified, as you said, the signatures were validated, so I'm good, I'm done. And then, all of a sudden, I hear that there are some errors. So I actually spoke to Attorney Ciccione yesterday. He called me back, and he was very kind to do that. And I believe there were three. There was a $200,000 error, there was the percentage error, and the $30,000 abatement. Those are the only three, correct?
No, those were the three that I had seen at that point.
Well, what are the others?
But the memo lists some.
There's more?
Oh, yeah.
Well, let me deal with these three first, okay? First of all, boy, oh boy, the $200,000 is not an error, okay? What I did, I put a budget together, and I put the Mantell budget next to it, something that no one has ever done before. So when you go to a meeting, the hearing, you can see line by line the differences that I'd made, the changes. The $200,000 you're talking about is the reduction I did in, it's an extra column. It's superfluous. It's not even required by the charter. I did it for pure information for the taxpayers to see exactly what changes I made. I felt it would be easier for them to see the changes. That's not an error. If you want to show me in the charter where I have to show that, show it to me.
It's not in the charter.
It's not in the charter. Okay, thank you, I'll move on.
I'm happy to respond on.
You can respond, but I'm moving on. Okay, second, the cover sheet for the budget has a series of lines where you input information. I calculated the net tax levy correctly. No one is disputing that it's wrong, is that correct? The net tax levy at the bottom is correct.
I don't know that.
Well, you said you went through the budget in detail, so is it correct?
No, I can't tell. It's
Okay,
not- it's
well,
not
I say it's correct.
It cannot be determined from the budget you
I
submitted.
say it's correct, okay? I can show you how I did it. The only thing I did differently is, to use an example, if you were driving to Providence, instead of taking 195, I took Route 6. That's all the difference. The answer for the net tax levy is the same as the budget committee would have had. If I redid the budget committees, I would have come to the same answer. So That is not a error. Because what the taxpayers are voting on, there are three key things they vote on. They vote on the school committee budget, they vote on the municipal budget, and they vote on the tax levy. My tax levy shows the $30,000 abatement. I just came at it differently. I think I came at it the correct way. And to further add, what I did on my budget, if you look at the cover page, the Budget Committee's budget is not a balanced budget. If you add up those two numbers, they do not come to the total amount to be raised by taxation. Mine does. I can give you the numbers. My numbers are 32,106 for the school department, general operating and capital expense, and 22,955, 277 from municipal. That 22,955 includes the abatement. You can't raise the funds, $30,000 in the tax levy, and not include it in the budget. It doesn't balance. Which means every year, since taxpayers have been voting on this, they've been voting for an unbalanced budget. And it's not their fault, because this sheet is not clear at all. Matter of fact, I had a tough time with the percentage. The percentage is right underneath what says levy a property tax not to exceed. That's not what the percentage is. The percentage is the percentage of the amount of net property tax from last year to this year, change. That's what that is. Now, your third issue that you told me about, I don't know what the surprises are. I, as a citizen, I'm not well versed in town politics or town administration. I went back to the tax levy last year that voters voted on and approved, which is in the 2019 docket. That's what I used. No one said, I don't believe there's anything in the charter, the town charter, that says I have to go back and use the adjusted tax levy from the tax assessor. He does that out of necessity because he's correcting any minor estimation differences. That's what I used. And so that percentage I have there is the correct percentage using that as a basis. There is nothing in the town charter, nothing, there is no template that shows me how to calculate that. I followed every step in the process of getting this budget submitted. Now, I don't know what the other issues are, but you're going to have to tell me, because obviously these are the, and I won't even, here's the other thing, okay? As a town solicitor, I was quite surprised that you added considerable value to the process by reviewing the math. I didn't think that was something you had to do, so I was kind of grateful you did, but you obviously did not apply the same degree of intensity to reviewing the Budget Committee's budget. Because if you had, just as the attorney said, you would have noticed that the amount, because I had trouble with this when I first looked at the budget, I had to read it and read it and read it, and I realized that the Budget Committee did not include the capital for the school. So I question whether or not you actually applied the same intensity to the Budget Committee's budget. If you say you did, then you are right. Math is not your strength.
Should I respond at this point while it's fresh? Is that all right? I guess I'll make a few points. I don't necessarily, I did look into the capital question because Mr. Mantel's budget treated capital differently than the Budget Committee did, which I think led to some of the confusion and potentially some of the mathematical problems. I think he's wrong when he says that you don't offer a template. The charter does, in fact, provide a template. It doesn't provide it in the section that we're talking about, but it provides it because the Budget Committee creates a template. And Section 301 then requires an elector to show line-by-line changes versus the Budget Committee's template. Now, if you decide that you don't like their definition of capital and you want to shift things because you think it's a better definition the way you have it, well, you're not doing what the charter asks. You're not making a line-by-line change. What you're doing is creating your own template in the hopes that the voters will understand why your definition of capital is not the same as the Budget Committee's definition of capital. Your charter does not allow that. Your charter does not allow that. There is a template. The Budget Committee model is the template, And all a petitioner is allowed to do is show line-by-line changes. It has to say, we're taking out this line, we're putting in this one. We're taking out this category, we're putting in this one. Or we're changing the dollar amount in the existing category. That is what your petitioners are allowed to do, and that's a simpler process. I think if Mr. Mantell hadn't tried to redefine capital, maybe these issues wouldn't have come up. There were other issues that came up, I think in part, because, and I'm not saying he's wrong, I don't know. Maybe there's an accounting definition of capital that the Budget Committee didn't follow. That's really not for us to decide. What I'm concerned about is that we had a template to follow, and many of the issues that I have identified come from varying from that template. In particular, the tax levy. Because if he had done the apples-to-apples calculation using the number that was available to him, it was available because it was in the Budget Committee's proposal, which was on the town's website. And those 2 pages that I've used to follow this, you have in front of you. Or at least they were on the website. I'm not sure they're in the package, but they should be. And those breakdowns show how to calculate the math. And so I didn't have to become a math whiz. I just had to follow what the Budget Committee did and determine if the petitioner did the same. And I'm sorry, and lastly, the idea that the $200,000 error was superfluous, I take objection to that as well. The charter asks that the petitioner show what the increases or decreases are on a line item. If you go from $800,000 to $600,000, that's a $200,000 change. And if Mr. Mantell had never inserted the column that he inserted, or if he had done it in a different way, perhaps that would have been fine. But when for 95% or 99% of your changes, you identify them in that column you've created, but then you leave out $200,000, I'm not saying that the math is wrong there. What I'm saying is that what you're doing is confusing the electors, confusing the voters. And that is exactly the reason that the charter requires that you follow the template that the Budget Committee creates. And it can create a different template every year. It doesn't matter. The charter doesn't say that the Budget Committee is tied, hands are tied to any one template. But you have to go line by line versus what the Budget Committee has proposed. And Mr. Mantell's petition in many ways did not do that.
Excuse me.
Could we, you had.
I've got to respond because,
Yes.
again, incorrect. Okay. I moved the cap. I understand government, a little bit of government fund accounting, okay? If you look at the disclosure form on the Tiverton website, the payments for leases are called capital. Yes, for government fund accounting, that's correct. But I, as a petitioner or a taxpayer or someone who's worked in industry and has dealt with capital and other items of an accounting, on an accounting basis, it's not a new acquisition. To me, capital is a new acquisition. What those are payments. It's just a different form of a loan. There are capital leases on which you're making monthly annual payments. That's why I reclassify them to finance.
Respectfully,
And-
Mr.
go ahead.
Rundell, I can't imagine that that's wrong. I have no reason to doubt that what you just said is true. The remedy for that is to put a resolution in requesting that the Budget Committee in the future classify capital in the way you described. It is not to attempt to do that in the line by line, because what that does is it leaves the voters without the ability to compare the two budgets.
I'm sorry,
side by
but
side.
I did give the voters the ability. I lined up everything exactly according to the budget lines. If I move the capital of the leases from my budget, I also moved it on the Budget Committee's budget. So line by line, they can still make the comparison. I don't buy that. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, when you're
Yes.
done.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay. If I may, it is not the job of this board to get into the weeds
Right.
of these budgets, am I correct? Okay. Our job as a board of canvassers, my understanding is we just need to make sure that the budget the alternative budget was submitted properly. It is our job to certify that there are 50 qualified signatures. And it's our job to make sure that there are specific docket items, increased, decreased, or created, which we all are in agreement that there are, or it's remanded, which does not pertain to this situation. In regards to Section 301B1, well done. In regards to Section 301B1, looking at the front page of the elector petition for alternative budget proposals, the appropriate sum for school department, municipal, the levy, basically each item I went through, A through E, is listed here. So I just want to make sure that I understand that our requirements are just to make sure that that is all there.
That's right.
Our requirement is not to get into the weeds of the budget and the mathematics. I don't disagree that it's something we need to look at going down the road and possibly, as Mr. Souza said, make sure we've got good budgets on every side and possibly have someone look at them. Our job as Board of Canvassers is just to make sure those qualifications are met. Am I correct in that, Mr. Chairman?
Sure are.
Thank you.
Well, I would add to that, because it's not, I don't think it's quite that simple.
It is that simple according to our charter.
Well, not according to the judge that interpreted your dismissal of certain petitions in prior years. I think that
However,
language I read, previously.
With all due respect, Mr. Solicitor, those were for different reasons.
I understand.
I'm looking at specifically this budget
I understand.
with these mathematical reasons. Those were what we're looking at. Your previous arguments, yes, you're right. We've gone to court many, many times over our budgets. I'm very well aware of this. They're for different reasons, not the mathematics.
But I think the language I read from the Larkin case is determinative. What the judge said is that when you have a signer of a petition who either was deceived or otherwise, was improperly or could have been improperly signing that, then that is your job. That's why this arises. Now, I don't believe that we should get into the weeds. I don't think you should hire a CPA to do the analysis.
That's what we've been doing
But
for
I
the
think,
past
but I think,
hour and 10 minutes.
but I think you've got a petition that on its face is inaccurate. I was simply going to the math to try to determine how it got there for our edification.
And in
The
all-
fact that it's wrong is why I believe you have to vote against it.
And again, with all due respect, how many people, I'm going to ask, how many people, when they go and sign this budget or any budget to put on, with the exception obviously of our town budget, has gone through every line item and looked for it and made sure it balanced before you sign that petition?
But that's my point of an assumption. You assume that those things are right. All of these things that we've been talking about for the last hour and 10 minutes are really best suited for the hearing on May 2nd. This is not the place to, as you said, go through the woods with this. We should go, have these things on May 2nd for the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief because my wife is pulling me at home. I'm Mike Burke, Chair of the Tiverton Democrats as well as a resident. I hope you have a great career as a fiction writer because there is nothing in here that mandates the use of a template by the petitioner. In fact,
Could you stick to the issue?
In fact, I remember when this was passed in the charter, part of the rationale was to make it easy for the common person to put in an alternate budget. This budget has met the criteria that is outlined in the charter. There is no reason for this committee not to pass it on to the financial town hearing and put it on the docket for the ballot. Thank you.
Good evening. Patricia Hilton, 99 Peaceful Way. I would like to actually, since Mr. Ciccione is so adamant about this, could you tell me in the charter where this template is required? With this, there's some sort of budget format template that's required. You're stating this. Where is that in the charter?
What I said was that the Budget Committee is tasked with presenting the initial budget, the starting point for this process, under its own authority. Under Section 301, the elector petitions are required to
Could you
indicate
tell me
line-
where? Could you tell me where in 301? Because I will tell you what I see. What I see is that the petition originator, there are those required numbers that we heard about earlier. But as far as anything else, it says the petition originator shall provide the town clerk, and the town clerk shall record either the specific docket line item, and then there's an S, meaning that if you want, and you're only changing one number, all you need to do is hand in a piece of paper that says, I'm changing this number to this one. So you only need to note the specific docket line item or items that you're changing. You don't have to follow the budget committee format. And you may not be aware of this, but several years ago, we had a petitioner's budget who was adopted who took the budget committee's printout and marked it up in pencil. And that was in fact placed on the ballot. So the idea that that somehow there's a required format, it just doesn't exist, nor is the precedent for that. It's a misrepresentation. Secondly, just to this point, I do believe that Mr. Mantell contacted you earlier to try and find out about the issues regarding his budget. He stated that, and he said that you spoke with him on the phone. And he noted that you identified 3 things. I think it's really appalling that here is Mr. Mantell, having done all this work, who has to come to this meeting and has to pay for an attorney to represent him, and he wasn't even given the courtesy of being given this piece of paper ahead of time. Because, and now his attorney's going to have to come back tomorrow. I mean, that's just, in my mind, that we would do that to a citizen is unforgivable. The third thing is, just in a really quick perusal on this, the vast majority of the things that you've outlined in this memo all have to do with docket items that Mr. Mantell hasn't changed or adjusted, and they mostly, and I would really like the Board of Canvassers to actually see this and see what we're referring to here. The way that Mr. Mantell did his budget, he took the FTR from last year, the Budget Committee recommendation, and then his column of numbers. Then over here in this 4th column, in some places, he noted what the difference was. That is not required. This column isn't required. It's completely optional. It's the only thing that's required is that you show the difference between these two. That you have the budget, if you're going to change a number, you show the budget committee number and you show the number that you're wanting. Most of what appears to be in Mr. Mantell's commentary is about these numbers over here, which are included in, I mean, again, we've accepted budgets that were written in pencil. This makes me just really sort of very sad. And now I'm going to ask a question as a town councilor. I would like to know, Mr. Mr. Ciccione, if any other councilors have received a copy of this memo.
Councilor Medeiros and Councilor Katz have received a copy from me, and Nancy Mello received a copy of it the moment it was finished for circulation to the full council.
So wait a second.
So they got it even before the Board of Canvassers got it? Is that my understanding that?
And I'd like to
Katz
ask,
and
I would like to ask
Medeiros got it
Councilor,
before we did?
so you're saying Councilor Katz has a copy of this. Councilor Medeiros, do you have a copy of this?
I'm looking right now, I don't
Okay.
know what you're looking at, to tell you the truth.
But I think the point
It's on
that he's
Cameron
made-
and Middleman letterhead, and I will point out to you, I would remind you that under the charter, you are required, when you provide legal information to one counselor, you are required to provide it to all of them.
Respectfully, Councilor, I
That is
did.
part of the charter.
If you
I
heard-
did
If you
not,
heard what I just said, I sent it to,
I believe
town
that
clerk-
Councilor Katz is probably the only counselor that has that.
that is not true.
That is.
But if you'd like to peruse the emails that were sent today, you're welcome to. But my assistant sent the town clerk and the 2 counselors who had responded to my initial email, Councilor Medeiros, or my initial conversation.
That's not what
Councilor Medeiros and
that's
Councilor
not what
Katz.
the charter regulation says. The charter
Excuse me.
regulation. I'm
Excuse
going to
me.
step away
I-
because this is a
I
separate
am-
discussion. My question's been answered. Thank you.
Chairman, I'd like the opportunity to respond to that assertion, which is completely incorrect. I sent an email, as I do with all communication to the council, first to the town clerk, and asked it to be circulated to the entire council. That's how I do it with every memorandum that I provide to the council. And I also sent it, and Councilor DiMedeiros, having been on that email chain, was a direct party to that, but it was going to the full council through that email. I had also sent it to Councilor Katz subsequently, because he had weighed in with some comments as well. So the two that were engaged in the discussion received copies in addition to the prior circulation that went to the entire council. And that is perfectly acceptable and the practice that I followed in the time that I've been doing this.
did not.
But the point is, we should have got it first. The council members got it before we did.
I was literally driving down here when that email went out. I didn't even send it.
The answer to that is yes.
I'm sorry, with copies for this committee.
I see.
Yeah, we did not get it first.
Okay, let's just continue. Name?
Deborah Polish, CPA. And I actually did look at his budget, and he did ask me to look at it. I did look at it, and went through the 3 points that you pointed out, and he's right. Did I take 195 or did I take Route 6? It's really the level of standard that you're setting here for petitioners. Will never have an alternate budget that's going to meet those standards. I want to reiterate what Ms. Souza said so well. 4 requirements, 5 if we go over the levy. Does it meet those? I do want to go back because it's extremely important. I want to go on record. The Larkin case is still active. I would please ask that you all refrain from discussing it.
Was still pending.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I know you were not aware of that. Lastly, I do want to go on record, and I will go at the hearing as well and make this, because that is where I believe it belongs, but I do want to go on record that the appropriation on the Budget Committee budget for the school committees shorts us by $316,000. It does not represent the legal vote. It does not represent the school committee's request that was voted on and approved. It is tremendously important because that appropriation is the only thing we can spend. We cannot spend more. People do not vote on the detail. We see one ballot question, and if that is not right, we do not get the money. It's extremely important that that ballot number be correct, and to Ms. Moran's point, I will make this again at the hearing, but I did want to go on record here to say there is a mathematical error in that line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
How you doing? My name's William McLaughlin. This is for the solicitor. I was here the night you pronounced it. You had done the math and it was wrong, and this was the reason he could not go forward with this budget. But everybody in this room tonight's heard you say it, on my count, 5 times. Well, his math could be right. I don't know. I'm not sure. So, or were you lying then? You lying now? Everybody in the room, it's on tape. His math could be right. I'm not sure. So if that's the case, you're not sure. Why are we not putting this budget forward? Because you don't have a clue. Where do you come off stopping it?
Thank you.
I'm happy to just say that at the town council, I said that the petition itself, the face of the petition, had a math error. It does have a math error. There is no way around that. It has potentially 2 math errors, actually, because the numbers don't add up and the percentage is calculated incorrectly. So there are 2 math errors there. I know that to be true. What I said was I tried to go back and run the numbers to see where that error may have come from. And I can't determine that because I can't read Mr. Mantel's mind. I don't know what his goals were in making the line items that he did. But I can tell you that no matter how I run the numbers, and I tried it 4 different ways to give him the absolute benefit of the doubt, the face page of the petition is still wrong in 2 fatal ways.
Hi, it's Denise DiMedeiros. I just want to say that I did receive that email at 5 o'clock while I was driving here. And shame on me, I hadn't checked my email since I've been here. The reason why I'm in the chain of this email is because after the attorney announced that there was something wrong with the numbers, the next day on Tuesday it appeared that some counselor on Facebook seemed to know what was going on and where the errors were. So I emailed our attorney, and I said that I felt uncomfortable that it appears some counselors knew what was going on and that the whole majority did not. He did get back to me, and that's why I'm in this chain of email. I brought to his attention that I thought that maybe he wasn't dispersing the information the way he should have.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sally Black. Thank you for sitting and hearing us. During the charter review that we had this past year, there were two people in the room the whole time. It was Mrs. Levesque and myself. And we kept arguing to please change the charter so this would never happen again. We're still pending, as you heard. That's very upsetting as a citizen. We got sent to court, sent to municipal court, sent back to the council. We're still going around. That's not right. We were just trying to put something that the charter says we can do. Okay? So we asked that a public hearing be held before everything was certified, before the docket was printed, so that if any mistakes like this were found, we could change it. And we could look at it, and we can all come together as a town and have the people the right to vote. It's a sacred right. If you take up the budget out of Mr. Mantell, the other one passes with one vote. One person can go and check that out, and that's the town budget. There were two people that were also here for all the town council meetings on the budget, all the budget committee meetings, all winter long, every Thursday night, snow, everything. Everybody worked very hard on this. Everyone was trying very hard to make it work with the different changes in the capital. The school's not going to put it in, yes, so in and out. So maybe it needs something else in it, but that's not for today. That's not for tonight. We need a choice in this town. 2 years ago, we had no choice. And if you want to go and look at it, a lot of people didn't even vote on the budget because they went in there to protest because it just isn't right. The United States of America, that's what people fight for and die for, the right to vote. When the FTR was created, the big thing was to make it sure that everybody could vote Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 7 in the morning till 8 at night. Gives everyone a chance to come. I stand out here Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I chat with everyone, and I show them some of the different budgets they've talked about. One that had everything scribbled and everything, and it was like, we said, this can't be true. It was on the docket. Another one that had 2 exact numbers for schools in town, but the levy wasn't the same. I made a big thing. I said, how is this happening? They said, I don't know. I said, I'll tell you how, because they're taken out of the general fund to pay for this. And people my kids' age, I said, you're saving up for a house. You have all your money put away for your down payment. We're going for the library bond. And I said, so would you now take that money out and go spend it and go out and do it? They said, never. I said, that's what we're doing today if you go in and vote for this budget. It's a long story. There's a lot of stories. But I'm just going to tell you, Mr. Sanford Mantell, I have to say, I'm so excited because in 2009, there was a budget brought forth at the town meeting. 3 people made a motion to cut the school $600,000. Mr. Justin Katz, Mr. Joseph Souza, and Mr. Sanford Mantell. Now, I'm just saying. So wait, no, so I'm saying you looked, you came to the meetings, you learned, you talked to people, and now he's coming because he knows it's authentic. It's really authentic. The casino's here. Not only that, don't even touch that. We've had great growth in this town. We've been waiting for that growth. People pay taxes for their services. We have ambulances from Warren. We don't have to go in. That's for the public hearing. But we won't need a public hearing if you vote tonight for not another budget. There'll be just one budget to swing right through. And I think we all know that's wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I may just briefly, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to keep dragging this out, but again, I don't disagree about the democratic principles at stake here. I really, as I said before, I applaud Mr. Mantell's efforts. I think it's unfortunate that we're in this position, but there's 2 ways to fix that. One, I think you just addressed. You could modify the charter to make sure that there's a simpler process or some other process that's less open to these types of errors. The other would be if Mr. Mantell had either simply deferred the line items to the Budget Committee, which is a much simpler process and much less likely to cause errors. And secondly, if you know the model had been followed that the Budget Committee presented. I just don't believe, and the courts have agreed, that there is a balance to be had here. And the voter, the interest in representative participatory democracy is important, but the town has decided by drafting the charter the way it's drafted, we're stuck with the one we have today, right? This is what we have to work under. The charter we have today does not give leeway. It is very clear because it doesn't want the voters to be deceived. If somebody came in and said, I want to cut taxes by $10 million, or sorry, raise taxes by $10 million, but the levy will be a 10% reduction. Would you let that go through?
By our charter, yes.
I don't believe you can. I don't believe you should, certainly.
But by our
because
charter, we can,
No, I
as
don't-
long as it follows those requirements.
I don't believe that's true. So what you don't want to do is set a precedent here that leads to some absurd result down the road. This is, it's an unfortunate situation, I really do believe that. But you have to follow the rules that you have. And unfortunately, your charter does not permit Mr. Mantel's petition to go forward.
But it does.
But it does.
We're not supposed to debate it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, we'll debate.
Hi, good afternoon, Justin Katz. I wanted to start with something that Board Member Souza pointed out, that the petition has to comply with 301B1, which lays out the 5, usually 4, but potentially 5 items that have to be listed. And I would say several of them are undoubtedly not complied with, and several of them are arguably not complied with. So very quickly, I just wanted to explain that, because that to me is very relevant to your decision today or tomorrow, whichever day you choose to make it. So the first requirement is the dollar amount to appropriate for the school department budget. On the petition, we have $32,106,000. In the backup documents, education is less than that. It doesn't include any capital. There's no separate breakout of the school capital. So that number does not match. In fact, if you find that line item in the budget, in Mr. Mantel's budget, it's in the same category as on the budget committee, which the budget committee labeled municipal capital. He does not. But it says school department, see school reserve, which isn't school capital. That's a different thing. In fact, if you pay attention, that's probably the reserve fund that the school department has of extra money. But the relevant point here is this $32 million shown on the petition is not anywhere in his backup materials. The second line, appropriate a sum of $22,955,277,000 for municipal operations and capital expenses. Again, that does not match anything in this document. And in fact, if you take out the capital and just accept that as a clerical error or however you want to do it, it's still not the same number. It's off by $30,000.
With all due respect, Mr. Katz, and not to try to save some time since we always know time is an issue, it doesn't say in the charter that the dollar amount to appropriate has to match what's in the backup. Per our, and the chairman said I was correct, we just have to show that there is a dollar amount there. And we have to, as the job of the Board of Canvassers, are the dollar amounts listed? Yes. Are they increase or decrease line item? Yes. Do we have 50 qualified signatures? Yes. That is the job of the Board of Canvassers. Our job is not to go and say, well, does this amount match what's in the back of the packet?
But, well,
So,
in fact,
with all due respect, what you're going at has no bearing on what our function is.
well, in fact, it says in the charter, the dollar amount to appropriate.
And it
And that has to
says
correspond.
appropriate-
Excuse me, may I finish, please? According to 301D1, it has to include the specific docket line items to be increased, decreased, or created to generate that appropriation. Those don't match.
But it shows an increase or decrease. It doesn't say it has to match. Please understand. I understand what you're saying.
But
And I
which
don't
number is the
Well,
appropriation?
and I don't disagree that our system is flawed. My argument is by the wording of our town charter and by what we have been elected to do, I'm an alternate, but by what the Board of Canvassers has been elected to do, is to make sure that these are done. Our job is not to get into the weeds of the budget. Our job is not to make sure that there's all corresponding matchy. That's not our purview. That is the purview of the Budget Committee. That is the purview of the voters who are going to look at the budget and vote on them. You yourself, many, many years, have said that it should be up to the people to choose a budget and to vote on a budget. And therefore, you have always pushed to have an alternate budget as long as it met those requirements. Now, the fact that you did not have anything to do with this budget makes me suspect as to why you're questioning it. Because we are actually going to what you have always stated, that this should be up to the people. And that is the Board of Canvassers' job, is to make sure that this goes forth to the people.
The Board of Canvassers' job is to ensure that a qualified elector petition, and we've gone to court for 2 years discussing these matters, to make sure that a qualified budget petition goes on the ballot. The math goes to the qualification, but we can clarify it a bit
But
if
it
we go.
doesn't, it's
We
not
can
in the
clarify this a
charter.
bit if we go to.
Justin, it's not in the charter.
All right,
Please
I'll
go
continue
read
on the charter
charter.
then. And the next line item that has to be complied with is the dollar amount to raise by taxation, including maximum dollar amounts for motor vehicle, real and tangible property, and resulting total property tax levies. So you turn to the petition. You've got motor vehicle levy not to exceed $1,340,000, real and tangible property tax not to exceed $36,532,048. Those two numbers do not equal the levy property tax not to exceed
not the job of the Board of
37,842.
Canvassers.
No, the petition, or the charter says you show two numbers and the resulting number. This does not accomplish that. The math is wrong. The math is just simply wrong. And then again, it says the charter says to show the percentage increase or decrease to the prior year's certified net tax levy. I would say that the net tax levy is a number produced by the assessor, so it is the duty of the petitioner to find that number and calculate it. But even so, the mathematics are wrong.
Not in the charter.
Okay. Your 5 minutes is about up.
Well, much of it was used up by one of the board members, so. And again, with regard to.
Short, so they need to limit public comment.
With regard to.
Going into executive session pretty soon.
So, two of the charter requirements have not been followed in precisely ways that you've claimed in the past. And I also want to point out that in past, we would come to this meeting, and that's where we would discover that there was some kind of problem. In fact, one year, you requested a memo from the solicitor at this meeting and got it subsequently. So it's a short time frame, and I think the solicitor's done a good job trying to be more compliant with the way it ought to go. Now, I want to clarify one thing that's been said as well. An abatement is not an expense. This creates a problem because if this budget were to pass, we would have a number for expenditures that is $60,000 different from the amount we would be permitted to tax for under this
With all due
petition.
respect, we're not going into the weeds. We've already discussed this.
But this is all with regard to the point that the people who sign a petition and then the voters have a right to have numbers on the ballot that match up, that are clear, and that are accurate, and that has not been complied with. Now, the charter does provide that you, the Board of Canvassers, are charged with certification of all elector petitions, and for 2 years, you have interpreted this language to mean that you can, in fact, last year it wasn't even just math. Last year it was interpreting the law and whether somebody might file a complaint. And you are weighing, well, if we do this, there will be a complaint. If we do that, that'll be a complaint.
Justice, I think you should go to the hearing. All of these are questions you're asking.
But at that point, my final point here is, given the history here, for you to take these changes and say it's no longer suddenly this year our duty to determine whether the petition is qualified under terms other than the signatures, I think that creates a reasonable impression of unfairness to the previous petitioners who have had their materials disqualified, even though they provided every bit of information required by the charter.
And most of those have been disqualified due to
Thank you, Justin.
incorrect
I think it's
timing
time.
and other reasons, not math.
Patty Souza Cooper, 18 Beach Ave. I'm getting a
What's the name?
headache.
I'm
from-
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Patty Souza Cooper, 18 Beach Ave, and I'm getting a terrible headache from this because I thank you, Andrea, please, thank you. The purpose of tonight is to decide, did he do everything right? Did he hit all the points? Yep, he did. Okay, let's put it so it can pass through and everybody gets to decide which budget. I'm a little uncomfortable that the solicitor, that councilman are very focused on all the little nitty-gritty problems that they're finding with the alternate budget, but there's no budget committee budget that we're going back and forth going, well, maybe they don't have that either. Maybe they don't have this either. It's not even the place to do it. The place to do it is a whole nother night. Tonight, these people are charged with deciding, did he, in fact, do what his due diligence, create a budget that met all the charter points in order to pass it on? That's all they have to decide. All of this is insane. This is like ripping apart a budget to keep it from getting to people to see it.
That's why I mean, go to the hearing. Go to the hearing. And
Right, which is where it's going to be picked apart.
Absolutely.
Not tonight. Tonight you decide, is it going to the hearing? So why you guys are so focused on it, I'm a little concerned.
Okay.
Not
Yeah,
you,
right.
not you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that there has to be an understanding of where the responsibilities lie. This committee has its responsibilities, the hearing exists to satisfy other concerns. And so they can be debated, the nuts and bolts, the nitty-gritty, the line by line, however you want to talk about it. That you're right, that should be done at the hearing. This Board of Canvassers has to show that this petition is properly qualified. And if, and as you have done in the past, there are some standards that have to be applied. They are in your charter. You can't simply say, oh, all we do is look at signatures, because that's not what the charter requires of you. You have a responsibility to make sure that the people that sign this sign something that was comprehensible and accurate. And my concern is that even on the face of it, it's inaccurate. I go on to explain why I think in the body of it, it's also inaccurate. But the point is, even if you just agree that there is no way that this math adds up, the simple math, the face of the petition, I believe that you have to follow the charter and not put a confusing document in front of the voters.
As our town solicitor, can you tell me where in this charter it says that we have to make sure it's a qualified budget?
And I don't, that's not quite accurate. I didn't say a
Well,
qualified.
I'm quoting you.
No, I didn't say a qualified budget.
No,
but
that's
there-
exactly what you just said. You just said that we have to make sure it's a qualified budget. Please show me where we have to do that.
What does that mean?
And what does that mean? We don't. We, again, I'm gonna be a broken record, and I apologize, because I know people probably want to go home. We have to make sure that section 301B1, A through E, if necessary, is done. We've already agreed, yes, it's on that front of the petition.
You know, if I could just help my brother-in-law, if he could take a look at.
Could we go, let's do the hearing here and then you can
Yeah.
come back.
I'm just gonna do a citation.
Yeah,
That's
well,
fine.
okay.
So, I've made my point, I think you know.
Thank you. Diane Farnworth, 95 Pecasset Avenue. I'll keep my comments brief. I would just like to ask the solicitor how he can justify holding Mr. Mantell, a private citizen, to the same standard, or a higher standard indeed, than our 11-member budget committee, who could not come up with an accurate docket themselves. The school appropriation is incorrect on the budget committee's docket, and very likely remand number 8 is illegal. How come? Why have you not taken any effort to take a look at those resolutions and make that determination? I can tell you why. 98,000 reasons why. Thank you.
To answer the question, to answer the question, and to give the insult the response it deserves, we did look at the resolutions as requested by the town clerk. I don't believe that there are standards that apply that would cause them to be viewed defective, and so I didn't weigh in on that point, and I was not further asked to review it. To respond to the earlier point, I'm not disenfranchising Mr. Mantell here. What's happening is that you have a charter that has some requirements that he didn't meet, and that's unfortunate. But I don't have a voice here. I am simply here to advise, and you know, as with all lawyers, you learn early on in life that you can only advise your clients. You can't make them do what you think is right. But that being said, to give the citation that was requested, it's section 301C3, qualified elector budget proposals. That is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure that the proposals are appropriate, that they're signed by qualified electors, that those qualified electors are signing something that's comprehensive. That is the problem we have there.
Okay, so just to clarify, and I'll read to everybody. Section 301C3, qualified elector budget proposals in accordance with Section 301B1 submitted by elector petition in accordance with Section 301D shall appear on the ballot in an order determined by a board of canvassers lottery. Qualified resolutions submitted by elector petition, yada, yada, yada. So qualified in this respect is that it's in accordance with 301B,
And D.
which it is.
No, I don't believe it is. That's the point of my 5-page memorandum is that I don't believe it is.
Mr. Chairman? Motion to call the question.
There you go.
May I have just no more than 2 minutes?
No, we've had enough.
All right.
We've had enough.
We want to certify the petitioner's signatures.
Is that a motion to do?
Is it, do we need a motion?
Back to the agenda this evening.
Do we need a motion for that, or is it just?
Yes, we need a motion to,
Certify the elector's petition signatures.
Second.
that have, by the way, been
Verified.
verified by the board of canvas members.
And where are those papers?
Right here.
Okay. And how many are there altogether?
There are 3 altogether.
70
Which
signatures.
total 70 signatures.
70 signatures. Okay, good.
So you're gonna make a motion all before I, you wanna review them? They've been verified by the board of canvas. Okay. So don't sign anything till you've made a motion.
We already got a motion in a second, we just got to vote.
So
And
Deanna, you made the motion to certify?
No, Paul did, and I made a motion to second. Here's where you sign, Bob.
Now, I want to get this straight. Paul, you've made the motion to certify.
Call the question.
You called the question. Call the question. So that's stopping everything. Now, do we have a motion to certify?
I did. I made that.
Yes,
Vote
that motion.
on the motion,
Yeah.
call the question.
You want to
Okay.
vote on the motion?
Call the question.
Okay, so you made the motion to
Yeah.
call, you seconded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All those
And
in
I made
favor?
the motion to certify.
All right, but we can only have one
One motion at a time.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Call the question, vote to call unanimous. Okay, now you can make a
All right. I make a motion that we certify the electors' petition signatures,
Second.
all 70 of them.
All those in favor? Passes.
I have that unanimous. There were no elector resolutions presented.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to make this clear, just because it was raised tonight that Mr. Ciccione, Attorney Ciccione, did send this letter to me, but it was sent at 5 o'clock, and you know I was already out here at the Budget Committee with the Board of Canvassers at that time. And I say that because I have had some requests of the board members for any response, that if we had received anything. That's the only reason I'm saying that. I don't
Yeah.
wanna-
I'm glad you did.
But I was sitting out here. I will say I'm going into the,
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I think I'll finish on right there. She can, yes.
Jeannie, would you please pick these petitions up at the end, and I want to make sure they're all signed. Andrea, you can sign as an alternate. We usually take all the signatures of any Board of Canvas member here, even though any votes are fine.
There's no plastic around.
I actually have other certification things at the end that I'll give you to sign, to go, to get this printed to ballot. Yes, tomorrow too.
Yeah, Bob, you didn't, this is month and day, you didn't sign it.
Again.
Just scratch it out.
So I'm also gonna
I didn't sign that one.
okay, let me see.
I haven't signed it.
Okay, just sign, these papers are lengthy, so just sign it over here, Bob, it's fine, and then the other has to sign it. We all sign it on the bottom, that's fine. Here is the agenda, that's fine, we'll type in the date, and this last one.
And you said there was no resolutions?
The resolutions that you're gonna approve to certify are on this docket that you have. It is the budget committees, actually, the charter says the budget committees will go on. But you can approve their proposal and resolutions, and then approve, because you're supposed to approve the word and the town council. I mean, approve or not approve, not town council. Both those, and I have the certification papers and the warrant already typed, so before the end of the meeting, I will have you sign that as well. But essentially, by you signing these, you are certifying that petition.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't understand that.
I said, I have.
Speak into the microphone, please.
I'm just informing the Board of Canvas that I have the certification sheets that I need them to sign for the Board of Election to accept it to print out the ballot. And the warning for the financial town referendum is prepared. That's all I'm explaining to them.
You continue to go down your agenda, right?
We continue to go down the agenda. So this is certification of ballot, budget proposals, and resolutions. So you might want to just make a motion to, would you rather have the certification sheet? Or you want to make it off this to say this budget and resolutions and town council resolutions?
That's the most clear, isn't it?
It is, but it's also on my sheets, I can print it out for you. I didn't know you'd get to that part yet.
Did you, as the town solicitor, look at these resolutions?
Yes,
I did.
I did send the resolutions.
Okay, but where is the information on that?
He doesn't,
Is
he
it
said he
in-
didn't have any
I
issues.
had no issues, no issues.
with any of those, okay. Can we have that in writing? Okay.
We're on the record, so you have it on the record.
Very good. All right, with the solicitor's consent that all of these have been approved by him, I make a motion that we certify the ballot and the proposals and the resolutions.
Second.
The budget committee and the resolutions of both the budget
Right.
committee and town council.
Right.
All those in favor?
Now, I'm going to have you sign one other paper just to get this all printed, but we will. I'll go print that out actually. Gina, you go in my.
It's already, that radio is already going, Bob. That ship has sailed. Who is? No, she. Too bad Laura isn't here. She could have kept it down.
I learned early on never to schedule something after a Tiverton meeting.
You've learned that already, huh?
Took about one meeting to learn that.
You're gonna vote on certifying budget proposals, right?
They already did.
We did.
You just voted on certifying the budget proposals?
Yep. Unanimous.
And the resolutions.
And the rest
They voted on the signatures, not on the ballot.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, but that is the certification, there's no further vote.
That's it.
All right, and that was a unanimous vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and it was a 3-0 vote to put both budget proposals on the ballot,
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
All right.
And the resolutions.
And the resolution request. So, there's no question in anyone's mind.
You're good.
right? Mr. Mantel's budget proposals on the ballot.
Mr. Mantel's budget will be on the ballot.
They are gonna sign one more paper that. Sorry? They are gonna sign one more
We're just finishing.
paper that's gonna,
When you're done with the budget proposals,
in about 2 minutes.
I don't want to disrupt you.
So what Jeannie is printing out of my computer now is the actual certification that we're gonna send.
Excuse
to
me,
the Board of
everybody.
Elections.
Excuse me.
This ballot
Our meeting
process.
is still going. If you could please be respectful of that.
Just to talk about
No, we're just gonna discuss it.
Well, if I wait 10 more minutes, the babysitter will give him dinner, so saves me.
And I don't want the Board of Canvas to forget, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, you'll be certifying the canvas roll, and at least the editor will be here, so that'll make it. I don't believe it's got much else on there, I honestly.
Well, if he needs me to do it, it's one of those things that.
Okay, so let me just tell you what this is. Can you make them all a copy? No? Okay. So, all right, so this is the signature copy of what we send to make the official ballot, okay? So the numbers have been proved, and what it essentially is exactly this petition, the Budget Committee's petition, which will go first on the ballot, the alternate petition, and then the Budget Committee resolutions will go, and then the council resolutions will go, okay? So this is the Budget Committee proposal. This one has a slot for each signature. Before, you were just certifying the signatures. Here you are certifying everything that you made the motion to, the actual ballot.
Wow.
This one is the elected petition. And I've done them each on a separate sheet, just to keep things simpler on our end. Thank you. For reporting purposes.
Simple is good, I like simple.
This is the Budget Committee resolution. This is the town council resolutions. You're actually signing on the second page for that, okay? Did Jeannie make?
That page and this page. This is the second page.
That's the second page to this.
My handwriting's supposed to improve with this process, too. That'll be good, huh?
Just make sure all signatures are on it when you take it, Jean.
Oh, that's what this is, okay.
I'd like you to just sign this added one, in case there's any misspellings or anything like in there.
Yeah, well, they go together, but.
Yetta? I know you're coming back tomorrow, but I want you to sign that
No,
one
we're
too.
not coming back tomorrow. Oh, for the meeting
Yes,
tomorrow.
we are at
we're
2
coming in.
o'clock.
Yeah, yeah, more.
1, 2, 3. Andrea has the fourth one.
2 o'clock.
Paul, that's just an extra end page to certify in case there was a misspell or a, that's fine. Thank you. So I will send this up to the board tomorrow to get it to get a ballot printed, and that's going to be part of our discussion on this as to how many ballots we want printed.
Do we have an agenda for tomorrow?
Yeah, we do.
Maybe I
Okay,
thought
is that the
maybe I
last
saw
one?
that.
No. She has, that's just a copy of it, that's fine. Gio, you have a copy of this?
This is
Okay.
yours, Bobby. I made a copy.
Diane, going to-
That's fine. I did this because, just in case I didn't, any misspelling or anything, that's fine. They've signed each proposal and each resolution. It has to be exactly as this, just because there's another proofread to it, okay? So that's not an issue.
Here's the agenda for tomorrow. I've got it here.
All right. So, Bobby, you want to call the next?
Discussion of the financial town referendum.
So I just, one of the main things that we have with the financial town referendum is I'm going to have to order a certain amount of ballots. Do you want me to just follow through as we've used the prior ones? We usually come to about, because we do pay to have the ballots printed, so I will order the ballot number by using last year's.
And what was that, about 1,300?
Oh, no, I think we ordered like 4,000.
I'm sorry, okay.
But I will check the number from last year and get that ordered.
What medicine did you take?
Also, we have contacted the school department. They are reserving the gym for that day. I'm going to have Lori contact them tomorrow to make sure they don't have anything going on the Friday, so we can set it up. We will have the Thursday and Friday for absentee voting here. We usually handle most of that through our clerk's office, having somebody out here. We do have the staff of poll workers. We haven't decided what we're going to be doing for the dinners yet, so we're going to have a meeting next week. We can do that one later at night so that those working can attend. We made this one a little early, I know, Paul, but I've always tried to go by what time the solicitor was available to come in. I've done it for any solicitors we've got here. Contrary to people's belief, I try to follow some procedure. So the FTR hearing is going to be next Thursday evening. That the Board of Canvass doesn't have to participate in, and the clerk only has to organize it and kind of keep it going. So that involves the budget, some members from the Budget Committee, some members from the council, the town solicitor. Did you mark that down? Second Thursday night, is that our
Maybe your show this time would be, how many meetings?
Yeah, right,
7
yeah.
p.m.
Yeah, I remember that.
In the auditorium. Okay, so our solicitor with our council president usually does.
Email it.
And the petitioners can have someone up there, but do not have to have someone up there. So that's going to take place on the 2nd. We've already advertised that twice in the Secana Times. Laurie took care of the advertising, and it's been advertised twice, as was anything else that we had to advertise, so we seem to be moving along. It's just the FTR. We will work on some setup for the meals. We limit it to $10. It's all in one place, so it shouldn't be a
And what's
problem.
25 people, 30 people?
I'm sorry?
How many people are we expecting to feed again?
I want to say in total, because we also handled the set of supervisors and clerk and moderator here. No, it's more like 30-some.
Yeah, I think something around.
Yeah, 30-some. Because remember, it gets a little more, expedite through a little quicker and everything.
Yeah, it's much better.
No, but it's much better now. You don't have to go into an aisle for A to C and Elton. You just stay on that. I do believe what we would want to do is hire, since Lori Smith will be, her last day of work is May 9th. She's been our canvassing clerk for years. I think we should hire her as an an additional moderator there. She can handle any issues, problems, tech issues that come up there. And it will mean we won't need as much manpower going back and forth. I usually take several runs through, and all of you have always, but it's all in one place. We'll have a troubleshooter there who's more than apt at handling it, so unless the Board of Canvas has any objection.
We have no objections.
Okay, then that will work that way, and hopefully tomorrow is just gonna be, there's some minutes.
Yeah, but we don't have minutes, so.
Yeah, but by tomorrow.
I will.
And the certification, I don't know that we have any more mail ballots today because this was so close to it, we put them all in. But if we do get any other mail ballot applications, you don't know if any have come in, Jeannie, have you, today? Because I think she'd have put them with today's. We're gonna certify the final canvas, and then it also says discussion of financial town referendum. So any other questions that you have? But I would suggest you set a date for next week, just to go over the routine.
I'm out all next week, so.
Yes, Deetta is out next week, so we could make a night meeting for you, Paul.
Okay.
And what time? After 6 is fine? 6?
The only day I can't make it is Tuesday, just FYI.
Okay, so we won't make it
What
Tuesday.
time are we gonna have it?
I'm seeing Avengers Endgame and already bought my tickets. I can't do Tuesday.
5:30 is fine.
5:30 is fine? Oh, I thought this was a little too early.
No, no.
Okay. So we can do it at 5:30, which is a better time for me because I stay here.
Which day is that gonna be?
Whatever day you and Bobby and.
Wednesday looks
I was gonna say,
good.
Every day's okay with me.
Well, and the hearing's on Tuesday. The hearing's on Tuesday.
The hearing's on Thursday.
On Thursday.
I think Wednesday.
Wednesday, just
okay.
before the hearing, that'll be good. It'll be a brief meeting though, because I don't want to be here late the night before the hearing. Because I might have to, and that'll be a good time for me after work to stay till 5:30, because I'll have finishing things.
So that's Wednesday, the 8th at 5:30.
That's not the.
No, it's not the
No,
eighth.
Wednesday the 1st.
All right,
Yeah.
sorry.
Wednesday,
Look at the
May
wrong- look at the wrong
1st,
month.
is that May Day?
Uh-oh.
May 1st at 5:30, that's May Day. Flowers, right?
Flowers.
Okay, flowers. Okay.
We'll have a May procession.
Yeah, very good. First, sorry, 5:30.
That's fine. The 1st at 5:30, and we'll get that posted probably Monday, because it's on Wednesday. And that way, anything that comes up, any other mail ballots, apps, I should have hopefully approved back from, oh, you do have to sign off on the proof from the board.
I make a motion, Bob's got another meeting, so I'm gonna make a
Okay.
motion that we adjourn.
No, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Meeting tomorrow.
No, we don't.
You want to make a motion?
Oh, it's actually scheduled.
Continue
so
it.
it's already-
Oh, it's already
scheduled.
It's actually
scheduled.
scheduled, it's actually scheduled, so we
That one
don't
gets
have-
scheduled by an advertisement in the paper, so that one can't change.
Thank you,
It's the final
Mr. Souza. You were
canvas.
listening.
All right, Deanna Maria, you're
tried.
gonna vote to adjourn?
Yes.